stream. Start Facebook. Just wait a second.
Awesome.
Thanks very much, everyone. This is another Meet the Gurus event. Thank you for Pedro Paulino for joining us. I'm sorry I didn't have enough coffee this morning, but welcome, Pedro, and appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks. Good to be here. This was such an opportunity.
Yes.
Truly great.
Wonderful. So the idea behind Meet the Gurus is really to get involved in a very deep subject quickly, spend about 30 minutes talking about it, get someone like yourself who's lived in the world of your subject expertise. And so what I'd like to start out with is let's talk a little about you, how you got into doing what you're doing now, and a little about your background. So just if you could take us into that would be great.
Yes, well, Paul, my career wasn't really all planned out, set. I mean, I decided to go study BSc in information system, but then there was just a turnaround. As much as I wanted to go into the software development environment, but that didn't plan out. So as I said, I study BSc in information system. I started as a end user instructor, where just the basic computer training, and then from there I move on, was an assembly manager, where I was more on the technical side of building, setting up on computers and servers, and then from there, and I just started growing. I mean, went to work in a higher education, where that's where I found the love in cybersecurity, because we were dealing with a lot of students that were always trying their luck to hack into our environment, trying to I mean, they were quite students that were really naughty and trying to hack into the servers and stuff. So that's where my interest in cybersecurity, I fell in love with cybersecurity. But still, from there, I just went and worked as a system administrator, and then from there, I spent 5 years in SOC, and from there, I just started growing and started doing a lot of certification, exploring a lot in the cybersecurity space, especially on the freelancing side. I had quite a few friends that were already consulting in cybersecurity. As much as I was full-time employed for a specific company, I was on the side just exploring, doing that, because at that time the company that I was employed, I couldn't work for the same industry, so I had to do as a freelancer. So yeah, and I realized that the skills that I had in terms of being very analytical and trying to solve problems, and I always want to break things down and trying to find out what was the cause. So that was the love. That's where cybersecurity was really my first love. I wish somebody had told me earlier that go directly into cybersecurity, but unfortunately it wasn't like that. So yeah.
Sure. Well, it's become a very hot topic. Obviously, everything is about secure applications, secure environment, and obviously today's discussion really is about sort of the human side of it, right? Not just the firewalls and the protocols. But you worked in the Securities Operations Center, so you've seen hardcore what it's like to be under attack from various elements or threats or whatever those might be. But often the threat comes internally, right? From a lack of knowledge. It comes from a lack of awareness within an organization that the endpoint security really is the employee or the person working in the environment, and that often, we used to run a course which I used to call "Don't Click That," which was often people not being aware of what looks like a threat. So how do you begin to establish a culture? I mean, it sounds soft, but I think it's quite hard, in fact. How do you establish a culture of security awareness? And how do you communicate that out to people that, in fact, they are the primary line of defense against all attacks from outside an organization?
That's quite an interesting question, Paul. First we need to understand. We normally know what a normal firewall is. We know that the firewall acts as the first line of defense, just to block outside threats or create a barrier between a secure and control network. But how do humans become a firewall? And so a human firewall follow a similar concept. I mean, there's nothing different in terms of just using the human workforce as the barrier between cyber criminals and your infrastructure. Now, so that it focuses on understanding and the alertness of people and how they can make smarter security decision. So people or staff may make mistakes, and we have seen that, and put their company data or system at risk, either because they are careless or accidental slip up, or even because they do not have the required training to teach them how to behave appropriately and to protect the business they are working for. So human firewall is basically a concept in security awareness that empower teams to fight against hackers in a proactive as well as reactive fashion. So to answer you, it is essential to commit a specific group of employees to follow the simple best practice so that they can be able to prevent as well as report any data breach or suspicious activity that they may see. So the more employees you have committed to being part of a firewall, the stronger it gets to your company.
Mm-hmm. So is there sort of a ratio? If you have 100 people, you should have X people on this kind of awareness team. Do you form teams? Do you find how does it get structured? Is it set out that, you know, based on the geography of the company and the number of people that are remote? Obviously, a lot of people are remote now. But still, a lot of people are on site. How do you structure this in an organization?
The most important thing, what I think lacks at the moment is what we need to understand, that we need to keep it human, mm-hmm. and we are dealing with human nature. Now, the structure should be very simple. Now, building a stronger culture of cybersecurity, so that people care about security and understand their role, so that in reducing risk and minimize the chances of breaches. But if we keep it human, that's the first thing that what I think what most companies missed it. When I say keep it human, for example, we quickly jump into establish an awareness, cybersecurity awareness training, or providing a simulation training, which is quite good. There's nothing wrong. But when we said about keeping human, we first need to go back into identity hygiene. Understand what is identity hygiene into a personal level. So if for example, if I were to, before I get involved into providing an awareness training, I need to allow individual within the companies to start sharing any incident, whether they were a victim of cyber crime. Now, when we do that, we are actually going past. It's becoming personal, and we are touching more on the identity hygiene if they were a victim. And when people start sharing that, it's easier for me as a colleague to listen and to be able to see, okay, if this could happen to one person, it could happen to me. So that's when we keep.
What do you mean by identity hygiene? Can you clarify that? Because that is obviously it's a term of art. But what does it mean to you, and how is it clarified to someone who's new to cybersecurity or new to an organization in general?
So identity hygiene is just as, I mean, it applies to individual or to company, but mostly individual, just to make sure that you are aware of what is happening digital. I mean that goes back into, you need to make sure that, I mean, you keep your password, having the right password, not using the same password into all your different whatever social media or emails and stuff. Making sure that you don't share your credit reports with just any organization. Making sure that you don't share your account statement with anybody, and just and keeping your records and documents safe. I mean, things when I talk about password, I mean making sure that you use password manager, and which you just have one master password, and the rest of the password you should not even remember, because password manager can auto fill passwords, and so also making sure that you take care of your social media, mobile devices.
So first of all, from what I gathered, was number one, you have a password manager vault, like a tool. There are many of them out there that allow you to have a single sign-on to that password manager, and then have multiple different passwords, either passwords that you may not know, on your various other accounts, social media, business, CRM, SharePoint, Salesforce, all those kind of platforms that you would then, as opposed to a lot of people putting Post-it notes on the side of their computer, right? That's an example of that hygiene you're talking about.
Yes.
Okay.
So for example, password manage does really help a lot, because the only thing you need to remember is your master password. Mm-hmm. For example, how I do it, I normally create 12 passwords for the year, because we have 12 months. Okay. So and that would be my master password, which means every end of the month I change my master password. That's the only passwords that I should remember. If I have, let's say, 15 accounts where I normally log in, all those 15 accounts will be auto-filled by the password manager. So which means I don't have to remember them, because the password manager does auto-fill it automatically, because I only have one master password where I log into the password manager, and the rest is it auto-fills. So if you create 12 passwords for the year, of course, a password must be complicated and must be a fiction. I always try to create a password that is fiction. It's not real. Right. When it's your master password.
So every month
that's just.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, every month I come up with a new password, meaning my master password for my password manager. So when I talk about identity hygiene, we look at something that is very personal into the individual. Now, after that, that's when you can start looking into providing an awareness training that focus now on the corporate level, because now it's easier when somebody can share a story that they were a victim of cyber attack or cyber crime. I mean, I know my mom has shared one that, I mean, opened my eyes. I realized, wow, and that was a few years ago. And you start becoming aware of it. You know, when something happened to somebody that you know, you eventually start becoming aware of it, instead of just creating all this policy and controls in place that people don't understand, as if people are just robots. Yes.
So these are sort of personal stories. Did your company set up kind of SharePoint or common, Google Documents portals where they have these stories shared in kind of this video format? They say to someone, hey, go on Zoom or go on Skype, record yourself, describe what happened and how it happened, and show us maybe whether it's your email, whether it's maybe a logging into account, and then they share these stories on a common portal. Is that what you're suggesting, or is that what your clients and businesses have done rather?
Yes and no. I think yes, the idea would also be fine, but I mean, in any way that you can be able to share the story would be better. But I think personal, when you are sharing a story, whether it's a recording video, it's much more interactive and much more live than you just putting out there for somebody to read. So recording the different personal stories and sharing with the rest of the company. I mean, if you don't want to go so much into details, but at least just give a little bit of glimpse of what really happened.
Yeah.
That really would help. Yes.
It's creating a community. We had a question come in about password managers, and I was going to ask the same question: do corporate environments accept password managers as a protocol, or is this something that also requires kind of and are there some in particular that you recommend that in a corporate, and I said institutional, corporate meaning institutional, organizational, governmental environment, which they would allow password managers to be used both for internal purposes and then obviously for your external purposes? So do companies allow these, and are they safe?
I mean, it depends. The company do allow it, but mostly I've seen on the environment that I've worked on. I mean, they use it for certain employees when they are logging to client environments and doing a specific work. So of course, yes, they do have a password manager that they share. I mean, there's quite a lot of different, whether that's LastPassword or Dashland and others that are out there. It's the company can be able to spend amount of money for and invest in a password manager, which I would advise. It's advisable, especially when you're logging to when you're trying to log into a specific environment or trying to log into a client environment, whichever environment it might be. It's always good to really invest into password manager, and also I would advise anybody to also invest into password manager for personal use. Some of them do provide for a family package. Like for me, I took one with Dashland, where I took a family package which I can share. That my wife can have an account, I can have an account. It's up to 6 members,
Sure.
And then you can do whatever you want. Log into different, put all your information there, and that's very helpful.
From a consumer point of view, obviously I can see it. Actually, I've not done it myself, and now that you've mentioned it, I will. But because I have a zillion passwords, and also I'm sometimes sharing passwords with colleagues so that they can access an account that doesn't have a sharing tool, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually kind of amazed that there's some products out there that when you're using them in any business context don't provide for third-party access, whether it's Google Ads Manager, which obviously does, or any other platform. Usually if you're having an account, you would assume that every platform developer would assume that there are third parties you want to provide access, and you don't want to share your own password, right?
Yes.
But there are still some out there that seem not to have gotten that concept down. And particularly, in our platform, for example, for clients, it's obviously essential for clients to be able to access reports. So, no one person wants to share their password with a dozen other people, because they're probably going to use the password they use for all their personal master accounts anyway. So this is all well taken, and I think that companies obviously either come to the realization or are beginning to come to the realization that these password manager tools are essential. So what you talked originally about something like a committee or a group. Is it protocol, or is it standard in larger companies to sit down and say, look, we have to have, and large companies that might have multiple divisions, might have multiple teams in all sorts of locations, from Paris to South Africa to Japan to Tokyo to wherever, that they need to have regionalized groups of people who are responsible kind of as a cybersecurity monitoring group. Again, we're talking about the cultural elements. I'm not talking about the hardware, software elements. I'm talking about the network elements. I'm talking about purely the social elements. Is that something that's common? And if so, what are the best practices in implementing that kind of setup to deal with these social issues of cybersecurity concerns?
Yes, I mean, you can either focus on bringing in an external or an internal, cybersecurity team. Of course, I mean, you want to have somebody that focus on giving cyber training. And internal training. First of all, I mean, you need to keep education ongoing. When you have a cybersecurity team, and within that cybersecurity team, you have whether if it's at the HR department, somebody that is very well educated in cybersecurity that can really continue to provide training. And of course, there are a lot of tools available that the companies can use. But if you have somebody or bring somebody from external that can be able to provide such training. That is very important. And another thing that a lot of companies forget is that you need to give incentives and need to give incentives to employees when they are able to spot and members is able to spot or catching a phishing emails or anything that can lead to any cybersecurity attack. So
business,
so that's very
some sort of business or financial incentive that would incentivize people to keep their eyes out.
yes,
Not a bad idea.
yeah.
I mean, that's obviously it's something fairly basic, but most people don't really appreciate how important incentives are, whether they're virtual incentives or they're material incentives.
Yes, correct. And I think the most important thing is when you do that, you need to be able to try and build that to your employees' KPI. I mean, whether if it's count 1%, that really makes a huge difference because that's how you are actually building a culture. Because they know that I need to be able to be vigilant and make sure that I'm aware and just don't send any email. Need to make sure when I'm sending an email, I'm double checking that I'm sending to the correct person, or if I receive any email that comes from whoever that I can't recognize, I need to make sure that I need to alert the security department, so they need to be able to be very vigilant, and they need to be at least a scorecard that at least counts how many reports they've given, and then at the end of the day, incentivize the person and allow them to be part of the KPI. Now you are creating that part of the company's culture, and employee will continue to be vigilant in terms of monitoring what's happening. As same with you monitoring the performance of your cybersecurity training.
If you have such a report card of some sort that we could share with people, we'll share it on the link once we post this video, so that people have an idea of what kind of scorecard they should create, and maybe even what kind of incentives. If we can come up with a list of those incentives, that would be great, Pedro. Because I think that it's kind of these material specific things. I know there's sometimes like little cheat sheets or things that people think is not as strategic, but frankly, these little tactical steps often are the biggest and most impactful, right? So like you're saying to someone, and I'll take that in the context of even our teams when we really implement training plans and sit down and specifically say, what do you want to learn in the next 3 months or 6 months? And when you're very clear and specific about it, and then you check in with a person, how's your scorecard building, or have you hit these KPIs for this month or this quarter? Shockingly, and it's kind of silly, but shockingly, people actually do look at those little details and follow up. So I think if we could put that together and push it out to people who are listening, and there are many apparently. I've looked at some of the records just now, and so I think that
Awesome.
that would be great. What is your experience in terms of how to sell these things internally? What's the best way to sell this to management? I mean, often management says, look, we got a lot of things. People have got a lot of things to track. Isn't there's a real ROI on cybersecurity awareness, isn't there? I mean, a real return that you can measure that says, in the United States, we just had a cybersecurity attack on a big gas pipeline. Take the $4 or $5 million they paid, amortize that over every employee, and it's I don't know how many employees they have, but I don't think they have more than a few thousand. That's big money per person, right?
Definitely. It's just a matter of time that you might be attacked. It's there is no debatable. My former CEO used to say you cannot put a price on security. Mm-hmm. You cannot. It's just impossible to put a price on cybersecurity because you just never know when you will be next, and no company is susceptible to any attack.
Well,
no company.
Maybe he's right, but maybe he's wrong. Maybe you can put a price on it, but what he's really saying is that the price is high. So if you say, look, our company is 10 people, and what if someone took over our servers? Or our company is 1,000 people, and what if someone took out this team? And then you just put a number on it, and then you amortize that, or just sort of spread it out over the people. This is what it costs us. So you could, right? Isn't that? He said, I guess, somewhat I don't know how to describe what he said, but he was really saying, in fact, the price is high, right?
Yeah, the price is high in terms of the cost of the repercussion is high. I mean, that's basically what he was referring to. Because if I mean, humans are the weakest link, and it's a simple psychology for hackers. They know they are just the same. They are human, just like anybody else. It's not somebody. It's an AI sitting there and trying to hack us. No, it's a very simple psychology. Now, I mean, there's not. I mean, in terms of convincing the organization to really spend a specific budget into cybersecurity and invest into training your internal. It's not debatable. I mean, we have seen, even us we have seen some of our clients being hacked.
Right.
And it's, I mean, you basically, it's just your neighbor being hacked. It's not debatable on that. So when it comes to cybersecurity budget and convincing the management, it's always important that the management needs to have a buy-in. They need to be able to buy into this idea that we need to invest into cybersecurity training, and that employees are the first point of contact when it comes to such.
Sure.
So I think, as we have seen in terms of phishing attack or social engineering, it's more targeting on the individual.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. It may sound strange, my comment, but a friend on social media, a friend from high school on social media, pointed out that her next door neighbor was drilling or doing some construction work on Memorial Day weekend and other weekends and Sunday morning. And, if you want to sit back and say, okay, so what's the relevance? The relevance is, what's the cost of that to her? Well, annoyance. No, what the cost could have been, but if you want to measure and put a number on that cost, the cost could have been, well, what would it cost for you to take a vacation, meaning go away those weekends to, she lives in New York, let's say she just would say, look, I'm going to get in a car, drive out 100 miles, stay over for 2 nights in the hotel, little inconvenience, but it'll cost me the hotel, the fuel, the food. Okay, put that number on it, and assuming you're not damaging your house, multiply it by 3 weekends or 5 weekends, that's the cost. So if you said,
Yes.
again, drawing that analogy to cybersecurity, what is the cost? You have to game out. Don't you have to really game out? What is the cost of our business getting taken down? Let's assume there's a cybersecurity ransom. There's a dollar amount. You can sort of fantasize what that is, figure out what that cost is. Then you can say, oh, what if they just took down our servers and we were able to hire cybersecurity experts to repair that? It took 2 days or 6 hours. You can put numbers on this, right? Is my point.
Yes.
You can put numbers on all these things and then take it to management and say, you know what? Remember you thought that cybersecurity thing was just a vague risk and the number was either so big or so small? Here are the possible numbers, okay? What is it worth to you to fix this problem in terms of training, in terms of those groups that you set up, in terms of using password keys, right? So you can actually put a number on this and then put that in front of management and they say, oh, I really see there is a dollar amount that's at risk here.
Yeah, definitely.
Right.
And not forgetting the penalty as well. I mean, that you have to pay.
Right.
If through the GDPR, or I mean, it depends on different countries. I mean, in South Africa we have POPIA, where you have to pay, it's either 10 years imprisonment or 10 million South African rand. So
right.
there is also a repercussion towards it.
So that you would have to say, look, you take these specific risks of of being ransomed, depending on what your industry is. Obviously, if you're in a critical infrastructure business like gas and oil or telecommunications or other things, that's one thing. Or if you're a huge company and you've got specific assets that people are coming after, that's another thing. But if you're or healthcare, where people think that there may be bad reputation if you lose access to patient records, all these things can ultimately be quantified. And on top of which, as you just said, you put a bottom line number into regulatory risk. Right? So you can actually put together a spreadsheet. You can monetize this. You put together a little spreadsheet that says, here's the risk, the likelihood of occurring, here's the cost to associated, so there's the expected value, right? So you just put a number on that.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
interesting. I think most people think of these things, even when you talk about the human side, they think of it as, it's soft, it's not really going to happen to us. But now it's happening to everyone, right?
Correct.
Especially with the
Correct.
advent of bitcoins, where people are taking ransom in untraceable money.
Yes, definitely. I think with I mean, this is very simple. I mean, a lot of people are just careless and very curious, and they just fall a victim to any agency or anything, because these guys, they just know how to tap the human nature.
Right.
And as you said, it can happen to anybody. There is
Right.
nobody that you can't just think. I mean, whether if it's on a personal capacity or on the corporate way, it still can happen. And also the effect, there's two effect. I mean, of course, the company can close down. I mean, a lot of people can lose their job, but there's also a psychological effect
Sure.
in it that affect a lot of individuals. So there's studies around that. So there is quite there's a huge damage that can be done if such stuff happen.
Right, so it's not only financial, but it's I'll call it the emotional, the spiritual, the organizational culture that says, look,
Yeah.
we've had 5 attacks, no one really cares anymore. So you got to up the game to make sure that people are all in and on board and fully aware that the implications are not just for your money, your cost to the organization, the operations, but it's also your brand and also your ability to attract employees and people who think this is just a sloppy place, no one really cares.
Yes.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Thanks you, Pedro. I really appreciate the time and the effort and the insight and opening up our eyes to really pretty important area that many people forget.
Awesome. Thanks,
Thank you.
Paul, for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.